conflict with other people, either domestically or in the way of business, or when I was depressed in spirits or anxious about affairs, I now recognize that I used to fall back for support upon this curious relation I felt myself to be in this fundamental cosmical It. It was on my side, or I was on its side, however you please to term it, in the particular trouble, and it always strengthened me and seemed to give me endless vitality to feel its underlying and supporting presence. In fact, it was an unfailing fountain of living justice, truth, and strength, to which I instinctively turned at times of weakness, and it always brought me out. I know now that it was a personal relation I was in to it. Because of late years, the power of communicating with it has left me, and I am conscious of a perfectly definite loss. I used never to fail to find it when I turned to it. Then came a set of years when sometimes I found it, and then again I would be wholly unable to make connection with it. I remember many occasions on which, at night in bed, I would be unable to get to sleep on account of worry. I turned this way and that in the darkness, and groped mentally for the familiar sense of that higher mind of my mind, which had always seemed to be close at hand, as it were, closing the passage and yielding support, but there was no electric current. A blank was there instead of it. I couldn't find anything. Now, at the age of nearly 50, my power of getting into connection with it has entirely left me, and I have to confess that a great help has gone out of my life. Life has become curiously dead and indifferent, and I can now see that my old experience was probably exactly the same thing as the prayers of the Orthodox, only I did not call them by that name. What I have spoken of as it was practically not Spencer's unknowable, but just my own instinctive and individual God, whom I relied upon for higher sympathy, but whom somehow I have lost." Close quote. Nothing is more common in the pages of religious biography than the way in which seasons of lively and of difficult faith are described as alternating. Probably every religious person has the recollection of particular crises in which a directer vision of the truth, a direct perception, perhaps, of a living God's existence, swept in and overwhelmed the languor of the more ordinary belief. In James Russell Lowell's correspondence, there is a brief memorandum of an experience of this kind. Quote, "I had a revelation last Friday evening. I was at Mary's, and happening to say something of the presence of spirits, of whom, I said, I was often dimly aware. Mr. Putnam entered into an argument with me on spiritual matters. As I was speaking, the whole system rose before me like a vague destiny looming from the abyss. I never before so clearly felt the Spirit of God in me and around me. The whole room seemed to me full of God. The air seemed to waver to and fro with the presence of something, I knew not what. I spoke with the calmness and clearness of a prophet. I cannot tell you what this revelation was. I have not yet studied it through, but I shall perfect it one day, and then you shall hear it and acknowledge its grandeur." Close quote. Here is a longer and more developed experience from a manuscript communication by a clergyman. I take it from Starbuck's manuscript collection. Quote, "I remember the night, and almost the very spot on the hilltop where my soul opened up, as it were, into the infinite, and there was a rushing together of the two worlds, the inner and the outer. It was deep calling unto deep, the deep that my own struggle had opened up within being answered by the unfathomable deep without, reaching beyond the stars. I stood alone with Him who had made me, and all the beauty of the world, and love, and sorrow, and even temptation. I did not seek him, but felt the perfect unison of my spirit with his. The ordinary sense of things around me faded. For the moment, nothing but an ineffable joy and exaltation remained. It is impossible fully to describe the experience. It was like the effect of some great orchestra when all the separate notes have melted into one swelling harmony that leaves the listener conscious of nothing save that his soul is being wafted upwards and almost bursting with its own emotion. The perfect stillness of the night was thrilled by a more solemn silence. The darkness held a presence that was all the more felt because it was not seen. I could not any more have doubted that he was there than that I was. Indeed, I felt myself to be, if possible, the less real of the two. My highest faith in God and truest idea of him were then born in me. I have stood upon the Mount of Vision since, and felt the eternal round about me. But never since has there come quite the same stirring of the heart. Then, if ever, I believe, I stood face to face with God and was born anew of his Spirit. There was, as I recall it, no sudden change of thought or of belief, except that my early crude conception had, as it were, burst into flower. There was no destruction of the old, but a rapid, wonderful unfolding. Since that time, no discussion that I have heard of the proofs of God's existence have been able to shake my faith. Having once felt the presence of God's Spirit, I have never lost it again for long. My most assuring evidence of his existence is deeply rooted in that hour of vision, in the memory of that supreme experience, and in that conviction, gained from reading and reflection, that something the same has come to all who have found God. I am aware that it may justly be called mystical. I am not enough acquainted with philosophy to defend it from that or any other charge. I feel that in writing of it, I have overlaid it with words rather than put it clearly to your thought. But such as it is, I have described it as carefully as I now am able to do." Here is another document, even more definite in character, which the writer, being a Swiss, I translate from the French original. Quote, "I was in perfect health. We were on our 6th day of tramping and in good training. We had come to the day before from Sixt to Trient by Buet. I felt neither fatigue, hunger, nor thirst, and my state of mind was equally healthy. I had had a forelass good news from home. I was subject to no anxiety, neither near or remote, for we had a good guide, and there was not a shadow of uncertainty about the road we should follow. I can best describe the condition in which I was by calling it a state of equilibrium, when all at once I experienced a feeling of being raised above myself. I felt the presence of God. I tell of the thing just as I was conscious of it, as if this goodness and his power were penetrating me altogether. The throb of emotion was so violent that I could barely tell the boys to pass on and not wait for me. I then sat down on a stone, unable to stand any longer, and my eyes overflowed with tears. I thanked God that in the course of my life he had taught me to know him, that he sustained my life and took pity both on the insignificant creature and on the sinner that I was. I begged him ardently that my life might be consecrated to the doing of his will. I felt his reply, which was that I should do his will from day to day in humility and poverty, leaving him, the Almighty God, to be judge of whether I should sometime be called to bear witness more conspicuously. Then, slowly, the ecstasy left my heart. That is, I felt that God had withdrawn the communion which he had granted, and I was able to walk on, but very slowly, So strongly was I still possessed by the